neglect. There's no other way to put it other than that Bethesda Game Studios just doesn't seem to know how long a couple of centuries actually is. I mean, in Dying Light 2, they're really stretching the bounds of what 10 years can do to a building, much less 200. The Last of Us certainly did a bit better, with only 20 years having passed since the initial outbreak, and usually the environments reflect this pretty well. But here, I can't help but feel as though this house in Dying Light 2 is just in too good a shape. I get it. It wouldn't be as emotionally moving to explore a half-collapsed house filled with debris, leaves, mud, and wood rot, but because this doesn't seem to fit in with the rest of the detail work in this section of the game, it causes me to question my perception of the rest of the level. Like I said, did other people live here afterward who kept it maintained for a while? Did they leave the bodies alone out of respect? There probably isn't an answer to these questions, and perhaps my asking them is intentional on the part of the developers because the answers I will formulate in my own mind will be more meaningful than if the writers themselves answered them clearly and concisely. Or maybe, and perhaps more accurately, I'm just reading too much into all of this. Regardless, this section has done a very good job of setting the tone, especially emotionally. For the rest of the game, I had high hopes, high expectations, and I just wanted to see this carried through. Unfortunately, it isn't, and the tone in the later sections of the game go from lighthearted fun to weirdly vampiric abilities in enemies, making it feel as though this is a fan fiction Twilight spin-off, to a lighthearted action rom-com. Like seriously, this game hits every single one of those, and it doesn't work well. And it's just really lame because they nailed this introductory section and then just totally dropped the ball. It's really unfortunate because they're capable clearly of doing something much more somber, but instead they did what they did, which we'll get to. After we finish exploring the house, we get to sit down with Spike and drink a flat beer together as we overlook the vast landscape. Spike also mentions that he has set up a meeting for you at the radio tower with the man who knows information about whatever it is you're seeking, which at this point we don't actually know. All we've been told is that Aiden, our player character, is trying to find somebody named Waltz. We don't know anything more. He doesn't even tell Spike. But we do know that we need to be at the top of the radio tower listening in at a specific frequency at dawn. So we have our next objective established. Spike says his goodbyes and leaves, apparently trusting in his survivor's intuition to leave you behind. So you do the same and leave him. It's in this section that you'll also fight your first zombies without any assistance or scripted sections to protect you. They're wandering around the lake house down by the trail, and you quickly take them out with the first melee weapon that you're given by Spike. The enemy models look really good, they're all unique, and the melee combat feels pretty punchy. All a good start. You fight and climb your way all the way up to the radio tower, get your first boss fight in, where you learn the basics of dodging and heavy attacks, and then you start the generator to unlock your first safe zone. These are places that you can use at night to cycle forward to the next morning, since the zombies are far more active and aggressive at night. Again, this is a system you'll be very familiar with if you played the first game. Sometimes it's worth going out at night because there are much better chances of dropping legendary or rare loot, and you also get a lot more XP for surviving at night. So going out there, it's a risk reward, but it's often a fun one. However, if you just want to roll over to the next day, play it safe, and not take any unnecessary risks, you can just come to these safe zones, rest, and it'll cycle forward. Each of these safe zones also gives you a respawn point and access to a stash, where you can leave excess items and transfer them across the map without carrying them on your person. They also have large UV lights, which help to keep the creatures away. I will say these inventory boxes are now a staple of open world games, and they drive me absolutely crazy. All it does is increase the minutia and tedium of exploration and item gathering. There is no quantifiable benefit to the player by adding this system, other than just lengthening gameplay time. I get it, you want to feel grounded, you want to have systems which are more realistic, so you pick up a bunch of big weapons, you can't carry them all. So we have a carrying weight, or we have a certain carrying capacity, so we put this stash system. I understand all that, but At the end of the day, the stash systems don't fix the problem of being realistic, because all they do is introduce a system which teleports items across the map regardless of where you are. Doesn't make any sense that you can drop off 100 pounds of weaponry or crafting items in this location and then go all the way over here and pick them up without any cost added or issue. It's really dumb to me because it doesn't actually fix the problem. It just replaces the problem, the narrative problem, with another narrative problem that also brings in and introduces many other issues, such as extreme tedium in the gameplay loop. Because what will happen is that players will go about the world finding things that they like and that they want to keep. So they will grab them up, keep them in their inventory until they reach a carrying capacity limit that forces them to go back to the stash. So then they go back to the stash, drop everything off, and then go back out in the world. So you're constantly bouncing as you explore the world back to that central point, like spokes on a wheel. And that sucks because what they should be doing is just encouraging players to go around the wheel. No need to come back to the center. Maybe there's special crafting stations, maybe there's merchants that can give you unique items that cause you to go back in willingly and voluntarily. But doing this thing where you are constantly forcing the player to return to centralized locations just cause isn't good game design. It frustrates me and I see through it. It's just to pad out gameplay time. Either remove carrying capacity and just let people carry around whatever they want to carry, or make it so you don't need to carry buckets upon buckets upon buckets of crafting items and weaponry to stand a chance against enemies. Like, when you have durability systems in weapons, you run into this problem where it seems a little ridiculous that you're carrying 15 different weapons with you all at once as you're also parkouring across the city. So maybe then you just rework the durability system so that that dissonant point isn't a problem anymore. But regardless, all of this will be new to the player, as I mentioned, if you didn't play the first game. But if you did, this will all be extremely familiar because it's basically the same exact thing that we had before. Now, over the course of the next hour or so, you will meet the contact at the tower, fight your first humanoid enemies that are not infected. You'll encounter a brute zombie who bites you and be introduced to the main villain. And it's this character you've been seeking named Waltz. We don't know much about him at this point, but he seems to be in charge of a group called the Renegades. They're a sort of Mad Max-inspired tribe of crackheads and don't come off as particularly interesting. Their leader is looking for some sort of key that your contact has, but that contact gives it to you as he ushers you into the vents to escape. You then watch from your hiding place as your contact is killed while protecting you. And this happens repeatedly in the opening hours of the game. People will over and over and over again sacrifice their freaking lives to protect you for reasons. Like, cuz. And it's really weird. Now, in this particular case, this key that Waltz is looking for is very important. So he needs it. Apparently he's going to do bad things with it, which it turns out he will do bad things with it. So I can see why he'd be like, oh, this key, I need to get it out of here. You're my only opportunity for getting this out of here. So maybe that explains why he was basically willing to give his life to save yours and to distract the enemy long enough for you to get away. But still, it's odd. And it doesn't just happen here. It happens like 3 more times in the opening section of the game. Even when they don't know that you have the key, even when they think that you're infected, like all of this stuff that should not be happening happens just because the writers kept writing the protagonist into a corner, and then they're like, I don't know how to get somebody out of this. We'll have this character come and save them because they're nice. I don't know. It's really honestly quite bizarre. It was weird enough that I actually thought I was missing something, and I spend a good amount of time on forums and on Reddit trying to hunt down reasons for characters doing this type of thing, and most of them don't seem to have an actual justification other than maybe they're just nice people and they don't like to see people put to death because they're infected or because they're strangers. But that seems like a pretty lackluster answer, considering this is literally in a post-apocalyptic wasteland. Regardless, you'll escape out of the subway tunnels and leave Waltz in your dust. You're able to break into the city, at which point the civilians talk to each other and notice that you don't have a biomarker. This is apparently some sort of device you wear that indicates that you aren't currently infected or viral or significantly infected to the point where you are a danger. It's basically like the proof of vaccination card to be allowed to go into like a seniors bingo club. I haven't done that, but I've heard you need bingo cards for it. I heard it from a friend.
Na duże marzenia jest pożyczka w banku PKO SA RRSO 9,9%. A na małe marzenia nowa karta kredytowa Mastercard. Ta z żubrem RRSO 9,92%. Bank PKO SA.
Czy wiesz, że Alkalia Superwater pH 936 może lepiej nawadniać i przyspieszać spalanie tłuszczu?
Aby prawidłowo funkcjonować, nasze ciało musi być utrzymywane w stanie równowagi, zarówno kwasowo-zasadowej, jak i wodno-elektrolitowej. Taki idealny stan nazywamy homeostazą. To stan równowagi, w którym wszystkie mechanizmy funkcjonują prawidłowo, a procesy same się regulują. Na przykład, kiedy biegamy, zwiększa się aktywność układu krążeniowo-oddechowego, a zwalnia praca układu trawienia. Niestety poprzez stres, wysiłek fizyczny czy upał stale narażamy się na zaburzenia tej równowagi. Badania udowodniły, że alkalia o zasadowym pH 9,36 skuteczniej kompensuje utratę płynów podczas wysiłku i przyspiesza spalanie tkanki tłuszczowej.
Alkalia pH 936 to super wsparcie Twojego nawodnienia.
It's also at this point that you'll feel that you're starting to turn. You feel the effects from the bite that you suffered earlier, and it's at this point that if the player wasn't aware already that they are turning into a zombie, it'll probably be sent clear home now. The civilians grab you and realize that this is happening. So the market guards where you are immediately call for your execution and begin stringing you up. But once again, a good Samaritan just shows up to save your life for reasons. He ushers you away quickly, and when you ask who he is and why he's helping you, he refuses to answer. Again, writers can't come up with an answer. Just don't tell the player. They don't need to know. Soon enough, he gets you back to his base of operations, and he's able to give you a shot that seems to hold off the infection, at least for now. He then takes you up on the roof and explains a little bit of what's going on, in addition to showing you the city in clear view for the first time. Those biomarkers that we mentioned earlier that you need to actually walk around inside the market and the city freely is effectively mandatory for anyone living here. They track the severity of infection in the wearer so that peacekeepers, a militaristic force that maintains order within the city, can quickly evaluate whether or not somebody is turning or has turned. According to your new friend, almost everybody in the city has one of these bracelets. They're extremely hard to get nowadays, so you can only really get one if you know the right people. And guess what? This random person who just saved your life for no comprehensible reason, he is one of the few people who has access to these biomarkers. And he can get you one. Now, why do we need biomarkers? Well, the reason is because Aiden, the player character, is trying to get into an area called the Fisheye, but no one's allowed in there without one of those bracelets, which, once again, establishes a long-term goal: get the bracelet and get to the Fisheye. Over the last hour or so, some dialogue has revealed a little bit more about Aiden, specifically his true motivations for needing to get to Waltz and needing to get to the fishbowl. And the reason is because in the fishbowl is likely where your sister is being housed, who you were separated from years ago. Aiden doesn't know for sure if she's still alive, but your contact, the very same one that gave his life for you, said that she was in fact still alive inside that building.